And I know in a way it's difficult sometimes to switch gears to a little bit of a softer topic. Of course, the main concern is to advance our treatment of multiple sclerosis so that we can hopefully in the future cure everyone, or at least make everyone have minimal symptoms. But in the meantime, I think this is a very important topic. And in many ways, MS is an invisible disease. I couldn't look at someone and say how bad their MS is or how severe their symptoms are. A lot of people with MS report pain and fatigue, for instance, as being their most severe symptoms. But my interest in psychological resilience really stems from my patients, because over the years, I would meet people who really had a lot of problems for MS, but I didn't necessarily notice a strong correlation between the disease and happiness in life. Even a lot of my patients were just amazing. Even if they had a lot of problems, they lived happy and productive lives. They were resilient, and perhaps even more surprising is they weren't always like that. A lot of people struggled in the beginning. It was devastating to them. They had severe depression. It interfered with their life, and they couldn't cope with it. But later on, they became stronger and stronger, because resilience is more of a process than a trait. It's not something you were born with. It's something that's forged over time through your experiences and your actions. And I want to start off with a story. And this is a real person, Sandra Orozco. This is her actual name, with permission, of course. And you probably don't know who she is, particularly if you're not from the Los Angeles area. And I'll tell you in just a moment. So this is a quote from January 19th, 1993. And she describes her symptoms from a severe relapse that led to her diagnosis of MS. My head was spinning. I was in severe pain. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 20. I couldn't even turn my head to the left because I was in such pain. I had paralysis of my right face, my throat had closed down, and I could not eat. I had peripheral blindness of both eyes. I felt like I was dying. I lost faith. I lost hope. I lost my career as a healthcare professional. I was slowly going into a state of depression, and I felt worthless to society. I went to my nephew Jonathan when he was 7 days old, and I said to him, "I'm not going to be around. I'm going to be a little angel watching over you." And this is not uncommon for people with MS, particularly during a severe relapse, to feel so bad that they feel that they're dying. Of course, she wasn't dying, and she did improve significantly. But the point I want to try to make is that she had a lot of difficulties. So a little bit of a background on Sandra is that she grew up in a working class, blue-collar family. She was the first person in her family to attend college. She was very religious, and she was very successful. She became a healthcare administrator, and she was interested in quality control, and she would work with hospitals to improve their management of things like stroke and heart failure and diabetes, and she became well-respected and successful, and she would go and give talks to educate other people about how to maximize quality and follow regulations. And after this relapse, she could no longer work, and so much of her life was about working and being productive that she was devastated. Now, was she resilient at the beginning? The answer is no. She was devastated. She was severely depressed. In fact, she had to be 5150 and taken to a psychiatric hospital, and she had a lot of problems, many of which you couldn't even see. She had severe trigeminal neuralgia and fatigue, and she even reported some cognitive problems. But here is Sandra today. Now, as you can see, her MS didn't go away, and in fact, she later developed progressive MS, and in terms of her motor symptoms, she slowly worsened over time. She can really only walk short distances with a walker. But the smiles aren't just for the photographs. She's a very happy person. And when I first met her, I was surprised to learn that she actually lives alone, is completely independent in all of her activities, and she's very productive. When I went to meet her for the interview, she had someone drop her off there because she can't operate a vehicle because her legs are too weak. And then at the end of the interview, she had someone else come and pick her up. She's a very social person. She knows everyone everywhere, and she's not afraid to call out a favor. And what happened to her is that, she did go back to work for a period, but later as she became more disabled, she could no longer work in healthcare administration. But she sort of shifted gears. She became interested in politics, and she would go to different city council meetings and meet a lot of politicians and influence them and organize various movements to set up things like local police stations and changing the school curriculum and set up local hospitals. And she actually became very prominent at one point because of something called the City of Bell scandal. This was at one point national news in 2010, and what happened is that some of the city officials were stealing money from the city's resources and adding to their own salaries, and it was outed by some reporters from the Los Angeles Times, and it was a huge scandal, and Sandra was one of the people who was protesting against it, which eventually led to many, many people going to jail and getting new administration into the city. And she has various achievements and has won numerous awards, and she's a very, very happy and pleasant person. And if you ask her how she did it, I think that she would say, one, her religious community. She's a religious Christian, and she has a deep faith, and she has made tremendous social connections through her church. And two would be her relationships with other people. She has a lot of friends, and she's really not afraid to ask for a favor, to sort of reach out for help. And the third is her willingness to have a positive attitude and to try new things and to shift gears in life. And everyone is different, and everyone has a different story, and different things will work for different people. And what I would encourage you to do is I'm going to give you some different ideas, and of course not all of them will appeal to you, but maybe you'll like a few things that I say, and you could write them down and try to take action on them. And so people talk about the so-called stress diaphysis model of resilience. Of course, negative experiences in life aren't good. Having MS isn't good. It's bad, but some people are able to handle adversity a little bit better than others and achieve the best possible outcome. And so you can see on the x-axis, let's say this is the environment or the experience ranging from negative to positive, and this is the outcome, like happiness, sense of meaning in life, productivity. And you can see that with more negative experiences, people tend to do worse, but the resilient individual is more capable of withstanding the stress and, on the average, is likely to have a better outcome. And so there's a whole science to resilience. And what some people have found is that even after a stressful event, some people surprisingly find something positive. And so this is research from Tedeschi and Calhoun studying people who had severe stress and depression after the September 11th attacks against the World Trade Center. And they note that a lot of people who suffer adversity are aware of new opportunities and new possibilities. In the case of Sandra, even though she could no longer work as a healthcare professional, she realized a new ambition and became involved in politics and became more involved in religion. Some people develop stronger personal relationships and stronger emotional connections to other people who suffer, particularly of the same adversity. A lot of people with MS, they didn't particularly care or know anything about MS, but because of the disease, they go to support groups, they meet others with the disease, are able to do a lot of volunteer work, and form friendships they otherwise never would have had. Many people may experience a weakness, but become more aware of strengths they didn't know about, and they can foster and develop those new abilities, and they're also more aware of general vulnerability to traumatic events beyond one's control. Maybe because you have MS, when you meet someone else who seems to be struggling, you won't just assume that they're not trying hard enough. You'll think to yourself, maybe there's something else that's impairing them, whether it's a server at a restaurant or a checker at a supermarket. Maybe they have some problem you don't know about that's making their life more difficult. The next thing is that people who suffer often value life more than they did before, and they may be more appreciative of the little things, like being able to enjoy a walk or a comedy show or having lunch with a friend. And some people experience a deeper spiritual life and may even have a major change in their belief system entirely. And for Sandra, having MS really changed her entire political philosophy and allowed her to make positive changes that influenced other people. Now, this is from Ravitch and Schatt in their book on resilience, and they identify specific factors of resilience. And they say people who are resilient, they tend to have an ability to control their impulses and regulate their emotions. Instead of reacting with anger or with despair, they're able to sort of think about their emotions, control their impulses, and create a sense of optimism. Now, of course, optimism has to be realistic. If Sandra were to say, I want to run marathons, that wouldn't really help her because, she has long-standing progressive MS. That's not necessarily a practical goal, but if she were to say, I want to be able to live independently, or I want to try to attend city council meetings and try to influence local politics, that is something that she can achieve. People who are resilient tend to think in terms of cause and effect. They tend to have what's known as causal analysis, where they'll sit down and logically say, what are my problems? What are the barriers that prevent me from achieving what I want to achieve? And how do I work around my disabilities? And people often have greater empathy. They can understand other people better, and that allows them to form strong relationships with other people and a sense of self-efficacy, confidence in your own abilities. Even if you have certain disabilities, maybe there are other things where you have advantages over other people. And finally, they tend to reach out. They tend to not go it alone because no man is an island. You really have to seek the help of your family, of your community, anything that you can get. And so this is sort of a chart of what determines the outcome of someone with MS. Let's say the outcomes in the center are things like productivity, life satisfaction, happiness, a sense of meaning. There are many things that influence this. Of course, one of the main things is the disease itself, having mobility or vision problems or pain or fatigue. And of course, there are medical factors like the treatment you receive, or lifestyle factors like diet and exercise, or psychological factors, or the support of society, getting disability or medical insurance, getting transportation services. But there's also resilience. And my experience is that psychological resilience tends to affect other factors. If you have resilience, you're more likely to seek other people to help you out. You're more likely to have a better diet, have a better exercise program, be more compliant with your medical treatment, and keep appointments. Now, the National MS Society has an actual program on psychological resilience, and certainly you could sign up for this. It's called Everyday Matters if you want to go to their website. It's run by Don Eady and Kevin Alschuler, and they give a lot of advice, and these are just a few of their tips. One thing is to keep a gratitude journal. Obviously, there are a lot of negative things in MS, but hopefully you can think of some positives in your life, maybe related to your family or related to your hobbies or things that entertain you, and try to write them down and think about them explicitly. This will help you to keep a more positive attitude. The next is meditation. Just taking 15 minutes a day to really calm down and focus on yourself and relieve yourself of the burdens of the world. And there are a lot of different forms of meditation. I talk in my book about mindfulness meditation, which you can check out. By the way, you all should receive a link to download my book for free if you want it. You don't have to go and buy it. And if you're watching this later, you can just ask me on Twitter for a copy. The next thing they talk about is altruism. Even if you're not able to work because of your disabilities, maybe you could find a way to volunteer or do something that's productive or beneficial to other people. Someone actually ran a clinical study where they took two people with multiple sclerosis, and one would call the other and offer emotional support. And they found that both people benefited from this practice. But surprisingly, the person making the phone call and offering the emotional support really seemed to benefit more psychologically than the person receiving the support. Indeed, it's better to give than receive sometimes. They talk about the 20-second rule, which is the idea of taking action. If you have an idea, write it down and try to take action immediately. So maybe you're hearing something in this presentation, maybe about a new drug or research trial or some of the ideas that I'm giving you. Write it down and try to take action at the end of the conference. And the last thing would be invest in social support. Don't try to go it alone. Really take advantage of the connections you have, whether it be from your friends or your family or from your community or even medical services. Now, there's a psychologist that I respect a lot named Dr. Martin Seligman, who's pictured to the right. And he made a critique of the field of psychology in general, saying it's too negative, it's too focused on pathology, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. Yes, we have good treatment for these conditions, but what about improving the happiness and quality of life of the average person, or not related to a specific psychological disease? And he called this positive psychology. And there's a lot of research done on this topic. So what is it that makes people happier? These are some evidence-based things that are associated with happiness. One is eating abundant whole fruits and vegetables. People who eat more whole plant food and less processed food tend to be happier. Now, the next item, perhaps I'm a little bit reluctant to say to a group of people, some of whom may be disabled and unable to earn a high income, but this is from the research. They say money doesn't buy happiness, but there is some correlation between money and happiness. People who have more money tend to be a little bit happier. But interestingly, they found that beyond a salary, which is approximately the equivalent of 75,000 US dollars per year, there really isn't a big association between money and happiness. The next thing is having a strong social network. People who have more friends, closer relationships with family members tend to be happier. People who have a job or career they enjoy tend to be happier. And even if you can't work, hobbies and interests that make you happy are, of course, very important. It turns out that married people are happier than single people, particularly if you marry a happy person. And in general, if you spend more time with other happy people, you tend to be happier. So try to make friends with happy, optimistic people. And the last thing is exercise. Exercising regularly makes you happier, even if it's light exercise. Now, he talks about forms of happiness. This is Martin Seligman. The first is pleasure. This is a simple hedonic feeling. You eat an ice cream sundae. You watch an entertaining television show. You go on a roller coaster ride. You can feel that instantaneous happiness. This is, in fact, happiness, but he notes that it's very transient. It tends to go away quickly. Also, it's very habituating. If you eat a steak at Morton's every Wednesday, after a while the steak doesn't taste as good and it doesn't give you as much happiness. And so he argues the next two forms of happiness are much more important in the long run. One of them is engagement, which is the sense of being engrossed in something. Maybe you're a chess player and you're totally focused on the game and everything else tends to be ignored and time seems to move very quickly. Maybe it's your career that you're totally focused on or something else. Try to find things that occupy your time and make you really focused and engaged. And the last thing is a sense of meaning or the importance to the grand purpose of your life. And so for Sandra, it was things like religion and political activism. For you, it may be something else. It may be through your career, through your family, through your works of service. Find a way to make your life important and meaningful. And of course, meaning to one person is different than meaning to another person. And he expanded this to the acronym of PERMA, which stands for positive emotions, which is that hedonic pleasure, engagement and meaning, as I mentioned, and also relationships with other people and a sense of achievement. Have goals, things that you want to do, and work to achieve them. Having achievements, no matter how small, makes people happier in the long run. And the idea of meaning has been talked about by a lot of different psychologists. And one person I want to talk about in particular is Viktor Frankl. Now, he has a very famous book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is about his experiences being a prisoner in the Holocaust. And he's a prisoner, and the first half of his book, he talks about all the horrible things that he experienced, the death, the torture, the starvation. But he noticed that some people seemed to plow on. They wanted to keep going. They wanted to do anything it took to survive. And he wondered, what was it that made them continue, even in the face of this tremendous adversity and even certain death? And he found it was a sense of meaning, that people who had a purpose to their lives tended to do better. And in some cases, it made the difference between surviving and not surviving, because you had to be willing to steal food and do other little things and make friends with the guards in order to survive. And his purpose is that he was a psychiatrist and he wanted to continue his research and his study of human psychology. and get his ideas out to the world, and that's one of the reasons he was able to survive. And this is a quote from his book. He says, "Has all this suffering, this dying around us, a meaning? For if not, then ultimately there is no meaning to survival." In other words, if you don't have a purpose in life, in a way, you're dead already. So find your purpose. Now, there are a lot of different schools of psychology, but one thing that I think is particularly applicable is what is known as ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy. And people who practice this form of therapy, they encourage their clients to try to find a purpose in life, to try to clarify their true values explicitly and live in accordance of those values. And so what you're seeing here are just different values that different people could have. For instance, do you think altruism is very important, volunteer work? Or do you think wealth and success are very important? Or relationship with your family, or your religion, or certain hobbies, or great works of art? It could be different for every person, but maybe try to pick 3 or 4 that are important to you, write them down, and think, what are you going to do to live in accordance with these values? How can you change your life so that you can live your true and purposeful life in a way that's important to you? I leave you with a few ideas from the American Psychological Association with respect to resilience. They say, form strong relationships with your family, friends, and community. A lot of people with MS are open about the diagnosis. Other people are not open about the diagnosis, which is okay. It's, of course, a personal choice. But either way, it's important to have some close people that support you, not necessarily with issues specifically related to MS, but I think it is helpful to at least have some people that you can confide in. You may have big problems in life. Maybe you're disabled and you can no longer work. Or maybe there's certain hobbies that you can no longer do. Try to view big problems as solvable or adaptable. For instance, how are you going to get disability insurance, or a part-time job, or find something else that you can do, or find a workaround, at least a way to live life and be productive. And you have to appreciate change as part of life. It's definitely not pleasant, but it's something that we all have to face at some point. Try to make goals explicitly and take action on these goals. Even if you aren't successful, just the fact that you're trying and doing something will make you feel better and more optimistic. Try to improve yourself. Maybe you've lost certain abilities, but maybe you can develop new skills and new relationships. And try to be positive and optimistic and maintain a healthy perspective in life. When you look at the big picture, maybe there's certain things where you're very unlucky, but other things where maybe you're doing quite well, and try to appreciate the aspects of life where things are going well for you, and also be hopeful. And the last thing is that your body is a temple. Take care of your mind, body, and spirit. Make sure you get adequate sleep, eat a healthy diet, exercise regularly, don't smoke, and just generally take care of yourself, because that allows everything else to be possible. Thank you, everyone, for your time.